Welcome to Your College Bound Kid, a podcast for families and parents everywhere. Whether your kids plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate, and you want a quality education that you can afford. I am Anika Madden, writer and founder of HandleItMom.com, and I am the mom of Jalen, a college junior, Janaea, a high school sophomore, and John, who is the best fourth grader on the planet.
I am Mark Stucker, founder of School Match for You and author of 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions. And I am the father of Karis, who is a college senior, and Joy, who is a college freshman.
In today's episode, our news will cover the controversy around colleges offering lavish facilities to attract students and the most frequently asked questions on the rolling admissions process. We're now in chapter 4 in the book of 171 Answers, and we hope our kids get to know where the jobs will be in the future. And our question comes from a mom who wants to know what her college options will be for her kid who has average grades.
Good afternoon, Anika.
Good afternoon, Mark.
You remember when you asked me if I was doing any New Year's resolutions?
Yes, I do.
I'm trying something different this year. February resolution. Gotta drop a few LBs, and
Hey, I the LBs are definitely part of my January, but I'm still not going to talk about them until March. So yeah, good for you.
Let's turn to college admissions hot topics in the news.
Okay, our first article for this week is No College Kid Needs a Water Park to Study. And this is an article written in the New York Times recently by Mr. James Koch. He's a former college president. And Mark, is making a strong criticism against colleges and universities that are basically spending lots and lots of money on these amenities. And he specifically cites Louisiana State University, who built this massive 536-foot-long leisure river in the shape of LSU as a part of their $85 million renovation campaign. And guess who paid the bill? The students. The students paid the bill. And Mark, honestly, I totally get where he's coming from, but I do take a bit of an issue with this article in that he doesn't acknowledge the significance or the importance of facilities for our kids during this time of their lives. So tell me what you're thinking about all this.
I was really conflicted in this article. Part of me feels like I'm not naive, and I know that our kids are not always picking colleges because of their award-winning faculty and the curriculum and the small classes and that sort of thing. They are looking at the fun and the leisure. And I also know how competitive it is for colleges. And I know that I could understand a business argument that could be made. Like if we invest this $85 million in this gym expansion in Lazy River, then we'll be able to attract more out-of-state students who pay tuition, and in the long run, it will pay for itself. So I get that, but for the most part, I agree with him. And the reason why I agree with him is because I've always believed that when you can take a look at a school's budget, it's a reflection of what their priorities are. And my concern with this lazy river, and it's not just LSU, Alabama's got it, Iowa's got it, Missouri's got it. It's like this trend going across public schools. And I think what James, is reacting to, because of course he was a president at Montana State or University of Montana, it might have been, and also Old Dominion. And this is just a trend that's been going on for maybe 15 years, certainly, which is schools are trying to out-country club each other. And it's gotten, the profligate spending is at such a level where it's an extreme. I mean, when you were back in college, have you noticed the difference between the campuses, the facilities and residential halls, when you were around versus when you did tours with Jalen?
Well, I can say slightly, but there's not, in my neck of the woods, it's not that big of a difference, honestly. And I think this is where my issue comes in, because he cites this specifically. He says that, these things have nothing to do with education. Well, I feel like it does have to do with the education, because it's about how our kids decompress. The outlets that we're providing them with when they're dealing with these stressful classes and the course load, the things that they're trying to do to get to where they need to be. It's more than it is more than just about the academics. It's it's the holistic experience. And I want my child to enjoy that experience. So again, I'm not suggesting that we need these lavish facilities and, our letters carved out of, all of our acronym names. But at the same time, these things are important. So I feel like he didn't strike a good balance in this article to say that, yes, these things are valid. Some of these, these facility reconstructions are necessary. And in the case specifically with my school, we do have an issue where we're dealing with very old facilities, and it's so much that our institution has recognized that we've lost some of our students to some of the neighboring schools because of that reason. And I think there's validity in that.
Yeah, and I think, and you and I, we agree 95% of the time. We want to agree on everything. So this is, I think, a really good discussion, though, because there are two sides to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The point he made in the article, which I'm very, very sensitive to, is since the year 2000, tuition and fees have tripled at public schools. Now, I know a major reason for that is decreased state appropriations and federal appropriations. You can't put it all on facilities for that.
Right.
But there's no question that there is a facilities race that is going on these campuses. And, I guess this would be my question for you, Anika. Could anything in your mind be considered over the top? Could anything be considered too extravagant? Or do you feel?
Absolutely. And I just keep, I keep going back to the carved out LSU letters. That easily could have been in the shape of a rectangle that I'm sure would have, shaved off a couple million. I'm sure.
Yeah.
But the fact.
Yeah. And see, to me, that's what he's arguing. Mm-hmm. I don't hear him saying that you shouldn't have a nice gym, that you shouldn't have, an Olympic-sized pool. I don't hear him saying that. I think what he's reacting to is something that is very much a hot discussion in higher ed, which is the transition of campuses to country clubs and the keeping up with the Joneses mindset that is going on. And my strongest concern about it is, so let's say you throw a lazy river on, right? $85 million lazy river, and then you decide to triple the student fees. And in the case of LSU, it's up 60% in the last 5 years. So if you're a middle or upper middle class kid and all of a sudden your student fee bill went up $1,500, that's not a big deal. Yeah. Papa just writes a check. But who it really impacts is the kids that are getting full Pell Grants, because $1,500 to one kid is like $50,000 to another in terms of their budget. And so my concern is that one of the biggest reasons students drop out is because they can't afford school anymore. So in order to keep wealthy, affluent, upper middle class kids happy with all the amenities, there's an opportunity cost to this, right? There's a flip side, which is while you're doing that, there's another kid that's leaving your school because I can't afford that $1,000 increase on my student fee bill. Right. So I guess I'm just very sympathetic and sensitive to that side. And I think, and if you notice, he now works for an access organization that's all about access and equity and trying to make sure low income kids have access to quality education. And I think he's also reacting to a trend that he's seen for multiple decades. So, but it's a good argument because people feel both sides, right? People feel both ways about it.
As I do. So, all right. Well, one thing we can agree on is that there is definitely a balance that needs to strike. So here it is.
Yes, we do agree. We agree.
Okay, Mark, our second article is coming from the U.S. News and World Report, and this was an awesome review of the rolling admissions process, and it's entitled 10 Frequently Asked Questions on Rolling Admissions. So I figured we'd do it this way. If you want to go ahead and define what rolling admissions is, because I know we clearly want to do that first. And then there were quite a few interesting highlights I'd love to point out once you do that. And let's take it away that way.
Yeah, I think we're in 100% in agreement. This article was a spot on. He was really, was it he or she who wrote this?
You know what? Who did write this thing? I know it was a female. It was a female columnist.
Okay, she nailed it. So back to your definition. So first of all, there's so many different ways you can apply to college. Most colleges don't offer all types. They have a few that they do. I'll mention some of the more common ones. So most common one is regular admissions. And in regular admissions, there is a set deadline for your applications. It can vary from school to school. Typically it will be January to March, and what happens is whether you'd applied in September or if you applied the day before the deadline, you would not get your decision until a set time when the school decides to release the decision. So the applications, think of them being on a desk. They're just stacking up. Then admissions committee goes into reading season. They read them and then they release their decisions. So that's regular admissions. Then you've also got early programs like Early Decision 1, Early Decision 2, Early Action 1, Early Action 2. And in those cases, you do have early deadlines for applications, and you get an early notification. Okay.
All right.
But it's at a set date. So with rolling admissions, as applications roll on in, decisions roll on out. So you can hear in some cases within 48 hours, schools are releasing decisions.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was clearly one of my key highlights. I did not realize that the decisions came back could come back as quickly as that. So
yes, now I do want to clarify that's not normal, right? So what's more normal is 2 to 6 weeks,
right?
But still, what it can mean is you're applying in September, and you're getting a decision in October,
right?
Or even late September. And so that's rolling admissions. As applications roll on in, decisions roll on out.
Yeah.
So what else did you learn in this article that you didn't know before you read it?
Well, the fact that rolling admissions decisions are not binding. They're non-binding, meaning that, once you receive notification that you're accepted into this institution, you're not committed to that institution. Now, had I not read that and someone would have asked me that question, I would have leaned towards saying, it probably is binding because, they're accepting you so quickly. It seems like you should be making a commitment because they've been so generous, in terms of
I think, and that makes very logical sense.
Yes.
I mean, you still have until May 1st, National Candidate Reply Day, which most schools use, like over 90% use National Candidate Reply Day. May 1st is your day in case you want to, visit other schools, look around, take your time. I don't hear that often, but it really makes a lot of sense. What I often hear is rolling admissions and early action. They seem the same to me. Why are you calling them by different names? You're just trying to confuse me. So do you know the difference between early action and rolling admissions?
Not necessarily. I know Jalen did the early decision too. So I'm familiar with that, but not so much early action. Help us out with that.
Okay. So I can really understand when I get that question, why people are confused, because they have similarities. In both cases, you can apply very early. Early action, you can apply early. Rolling admissions, you can apply early. In both cases, you're notified early of the decision. So that's a lot of things they have in common. But here's where they differ. For early action, there's a hard deadline when you have to have your application submitted.
Okay.
And there's also a preset hard deadline is when admissions decisions or notification letters go out.
Okay.
So there's a clear timeline. So for example, if we look at Georgia Tech, they have October 15th as their hard deadline for early action, and around January 12th was the notification date. In the case of rolling admissions, no hard deadline and no preset date. And because a lot of times with rolling admissions, their notification process just depends how busy they are.
Right.
So if you catch them when they're really busy, you may be looking at 6 or 7 weeks before you hear.
Okay.
If you catch them when they're on a little slower time, you might hear within 1 week.
Got it. Okay. And Mark, I'll tell you, I was totally surprised at the number of schools that have rolling admissions as a part of their process. Like I had no idea that over 83, well, it says 83 in this article, but I think I've heard you say before that it's more than that, right?
Yeah, it's really, really a lot. In fact, rolling admissions and regular admissions are the two most common types of admissions. By far.
Okay.
Like there are far more decisions that are made, through those two processes than early action and early decision 1, early decision 2. Those are much less common programs.
Okay.
But rolling admissions is very common, and it's common across a lot of spectrums. So you will find public schools, a lot of large public schools, like, for example, Penn State, Michigan State, University of Pittsburgh, Purdue, Indiana, Rutgers, SUNY Binghamton, Alabama. Those are just a few of the public schools. But then you'll find private schools like Florida Tech, Rochester Institute of Technology, Loyola, Chicago, Laverne in California. So they're both public and private. They're both small and big.
Okay.
It does lean, in general, there are more public than private. That's true. And it tends to be larger schools more so than smaller.
Okay.
But there's no automatic rule like small schools can't use it.
Gotcha. And so, Mark, I think we should wrap this up on one of the ones that kind of struck me as being a little funny, because it reminded me for myself as a parent, and what to teach our kids. And it's basically saying, don't sacrifice quality. And I do have a shameful parent moment when I encouraged my child on one assignment. I'm not going to say what it was, but I was like, just get that thing out of here. I don't know. So it was very helpful for me to see that. Do not, parents, students, do not sacrifice the quality of your applications. When even though it says rolling admissions, that means don't roll it on in without, checking and verifying and making sure you're putting forth your best product. So I thought that was great to read.
Yeah, there are a few things I want to share. There's a few things I want to share before we transition, Anika. Okay. One is along those lines, right? So sometimes it's in the best interest of a student to wait and not submit early, because if their senior grades are going to be higher and it's going to make them more competitive, sometimes it's not in your best interest to go early.
Okay.
But I cannot stress this enough. Even that rolling admission schools take applications, throughout the year. A lot of times they will have priority admission dates.
Okay.
And so those priority dates are incredibly important because they're oftentimes linked to merit scholarships, housing choices, and schools can even have FAFSA deadlines.
Yes.
So it's important that people realize that normally I recommend that in most instances, it's best to be early because it's less competitive when there's more spaces.
Right.
That's the thing about rolling admission schools, is they can become a lot more competitive as the spaces become more sparse, especially if they're in a banner year and they're getting a lot of applications.
Okay.
And the one last thing I want to say about rolling is that a lot of times, people, when they hear about rolling, they learn about rolling, they think, oh, great, that's like a great early program. But what a lot of times they don't think about is the fact that rolling schools usually don't have a firm deadline, meaning that they oftentimes are a great place to apply if a student is late in their process.
Okay.
Because they really don't stop their process until they're full. And sometimes even when they're full, they're still taking students because of what we call summer melt, where kids just, whatever reason, don't come. So they can be great options for a family or a student that learns about a school. And, in a case of a regular admission school, it'd be like past the deadline, so you can't apply. But in the case of a rolling school, they're still taking kids in May, June, and July.
Nice. Wow. Thanks, Mark. Is there anything else key that you think we should take away from all of this?
Though there's one other thing I'd love to share, which is a lot of times students, believe it or not, even really strong students, they have this fear, and sometimes it's unconscious, that they're not going to get into any college at all.
Oh, yes, we were there. Yes, we were there.
So, and so what I love about rolling admission schools, I love for a student to get an acceptance at a rolling admission school early in the year. And because it's like, on a balloon gets popped and it's just all the air just comes out of it, or not even not pop, but when you just let it loose and you just hear that air diffuse. And that's kind of what it does. And it's like the stress coming out of their body. So, yeah. And so I love for students to get in a rolling admission school because they're like, you know what? I'm going to college. And then they enjoy their senior year.
I do. Jalen definitely had that moment of, oh my God, just let me get accepted into a school, please. Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, we're now at the part where we are taking a look at a chapter in the book, 171 Answers. And we like to think of this as our course, where we walk you systematically through all parts of the college admissions process. So talking about majors and careers for the first 10 weeks, and then we're going to talk about how to build a college list, and then we're going to talk about how to get in the colleges that you've identified. Then we're going to talk about paying for college without going broke, and then we're going to talk about staying in and graduating, and then we're going to recommend some resources. So today's chapter, in the context of selecting the right major and career, talks about resources that are available so that you can know what the job growth rate will be like for majors and careers that you're considering. So we won't mention all the resources, but I know there's one resource that you're really fond of, Anika. You want to kind of talk about it? Take us from here.
Yes. The Occupational Outlook Handbook is off the chain, man. Let me just say it in those words, literally, because I'll tell you, Mark, the way this information is outlined in this handbook is just mind blowing. And I honestly felt a little tinge of jealousy because I was like, where was this 400 years ago when I was going through this process?
You're not that old.
Yes, I am, but that's okay. And I'll tell you, I'll tell you two examples that I drew in. So I'm using Janae as an example, and I'm using another young lady that I'm very close to.
Mm-hmm.
So I know y'all have heard me say, even in these first few episodes, that I was really trying to steer Janae and still a little bit toward engineering, some type of engineering that I didn't know about. But nope, she wants to be a veterinarian, and she's the more I talk to her on a daily basis, the more she gets even closer to that. So I put in the growth rate. So you type in your job.
Mm-hmm.
I typed in the word veterinarian. Mm-hmm. You do the search, you pop it up, and boom, there's this beautiful tabbed out layered information, and you literally see the percentage at where. So I think it goes between 2016 and 2026. It shows, oh, look at that. The growth of a veterinarian job is 19%. Which they've identified on this site. Yes, they say that. They say it's above average. So that was amazing. I was like, oh my God, she's actually, looking towards some good stuff, like something that's going to be viable.
Yes.
So that's one thing, right? Mm-hmm. So the other young lady that I use as an example here is, she's a dancer, mm-hmm. and she wants to be an actress. She wants to be a performer, which is all mm-hmm. phenomenal. But when I put in dancer and choreographer, mm-hmm. just guess what the growth rate mm-hmm. was. It was like 4%.
I know where this is going.
Yes, 4%, yep. Right? So I say that to say, because I'm not going to use this as a tool to draw her away from that, because, this is what she's passionate mm-hmm. about. These kids are going to be whatever they want to be, but she has got to be cognizant of the fact that it's going to be a little, how are you going to get there? I see this source as a way to tell us just how real the struggle could be. And so for her to be able to.
Now that makes me happy.
Yeah.
That makes me really happy, because my intention in writing this chapter was not to dissuade people from pursuing their passions. And I really hoped people did not interpret it that way, because I'm all about, if you love something, I really do believe if you love something, you'll find a way to make it work.
That's right.
But I don't want people to be naive. I want people to know, okay, if I'm going into a job, and if I'm selecting a major in college to pursue a job that has a low growth rate, then I really need to have a plan. Like, everybody should have a plan, but you really need a plan, and you really need to execute that plan. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a very, very important way to use it. And I'm sure you noticed that you can even see the job growth rate on a state-by-state basis.
Yes,
did you see that?
Yes, that was amazing. That was amazing. And even my kids now are like, oh, I want to live in Atlanta. I want to live in California. They're already like plotting that out. So yeah, it's very relevant. So that was awesome.
Mine too. So that's cool. But here's where I will use this. Let's just use Janaea again. Let's say Janaea was this student and she's torn between dance and vet, both. Mm-hmm. And she loves them both equally. That's when I will say, well, take a look at the job growth prospects. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's going to be much easier for you to get a job over here.
Right.
And that's important. And you love them both. Why don't we go where the demand is?
Right.
And so I will use it in that context when I have someone who loves two things, and one has a substantial demand and one has a very modest demand. So I think that's an appropriate use of it. And that's how I'd love people to use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mark. So I love even the way they pick the top 20 job growth rates, top 20 jobs and their growth rates over the next few years, where I see it as someone who's totally undecided and doesn't quite know what they want to be when they grow up, where they can use that as a starter list potentially. Would you use that in that context?
Yeah. You're going to be a college counselor if you keep this up. Because I do that. I will show people the rate, and I will say, do any of these things interest you? And so,
awesome.
And especially if all the other things, the things we talked about in episodes 2, 3, also line up.
Okay. Well, there it is. Thanks so much again, Mark.
Time for a question from our listeners.
Okay, Mark, today's question is from Letitia in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and I'm going to paraphrase her question a little bit. So basically she's saying, my child isn't an honor roll student. They're not on the principal's list. But how do I increase his chances of getting accepted into college, recognizing that he just has average grades? How do we tackle that one?
First of all, Letitia in South Carolina, thank you for your question, because you and so many others have that exact same question. Mm-hmm. It's kind of, and first thing I want to say, and I cannot say this enough, there are so many colleges that love to have average students, especially if they are well behaved and highly motivated.
That's awesome.
They really are. And, a lot of times I like to ask people, I like to play a little guessing game and say, what do you think is the average acceptance rate for colleges? And invariably people guess much, much lower than it actually is. So there's all this hype around college, and it makes all, the Washington Post, New York Times about, oh, it's so hard. And this year, Stanford only took less than 5 valedictorians, and it was the most competitive year ever. All that's, it's great. It sells magazines. It sells books. It gets, it gets clicks, right? Clickbait. But in reality, 67% of students are accepted. That's the average acceptance rate for colleges across the country. There are lots and lots of colleges, but I think what Letitia might be wondering is, how do I find those schools? Do you think we should go in that direction with answering this?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's the $1 million question, right? How do you find them? So I will tell you my favorite source, if you're wide open and you don't have any schools in mind, is to go to one of two websites, cappex.com, CAPPEX.com. And the daughter or son company, like it was birthed by the parent company. It's called College Greenlight. They're both in Chicago. They share the same building. They share the same database. The difference is College Greenlight is intentionally focused on under-resourced students, first-generation students, DACA students. It's just, that's their focus. But either one of these resources is great. You go there, you complete a profile, and you fill that profile out in a detailed way. Once you fill that profile, when I say profile, I'm talking about it's going to ask you all their courses that you're taking, what grades you got in those courses, what is your overall GPA, what is your weighted GPA, what are your test scores, the dates you took the test scores. Then it's going to ask all kinds of questions about your interests and your family background. It's really detailed. And what these organizations have done is they've gone out and they have formed partnerships with colleges. Colleges actually pay them to get access to these profiles. And so when a college goes in and they look at your profile and they say, okay, you're a 2.8 student with an 890 on the SAT and an 18 on the ACT. Okay, those would be below average statistics. The GPA is under the national average. The ACT and SAT scores are under the national average. Schools will look at everything in that student and say, you know what? This is a student that we'd be very interested in. And then when you go into your inbox, you will see all of these schools saying, we're interested in you. Please click here to learn more about us.
Okay.
And then there's all kinds of information on the website. So what I love about it is you can unearth all kinds of colleges that you are not even thinking of that are interested in you.
Right.
So that's a really, really good tool. Scattergrams can be good. Anika, why don't you comment on scattergrams?
I love the scattergram. So the scattergram is this chart where basically it takes your child's profile. I think it's the GPA and maybe the test scores that it's comparing.
Correct.
And it's matching your child up against other students that have either been accepted into that university or college and or attending. So it kind of shows you if your child is in keeping with what they would consider as a good candidate for their school. So it just kind of gives you a sense. I know it's not a guarantee or anything like that, but it gives you a sense of if you're even viable as a viable candidate for that institution. So oh my gosh, I fell in love with those when I was first introduced to them.
Yeah, so those are really good. And there's some other tools that I love as well, particularly if you have a school in mind. So let's say you're, I'm working with a student and they're like, gee, I think I might be interested in going to the University of Texas, just you name your school. And there's some other tools that are really good. And those are, well, there's several, but some of my favorites are College Data and Big Future.
Okay.
So with College Data, you just go to collegedata.com, very simple, and then you click the admission tab. So it's really easy, just a two-stepper. College Data, well, I'm sorry, I just left out a step. You go to collegedata.com, enter whatever college you're interested in the search bar, and then you click the admission tab.
Okay.
And and then you'll have all kinds of information there about how many students they accept with certain GPAs and certain test scores and what they're looking for in a student and what they emphasize in the admission process to evaluate a student. I mean, it's all there.
Wow.
So that's a tremendous resource for people if they have a school in mind. Another resource that does something very similar, it's a 3-step process, but it's kind of more aesthetically pleasing. It looks a little easier on the eyes, but you have a couple steps, is to go to bigfuture.org.
Right about that.
And then when you go there, you click the applying tab, Well, keep forgetting to enter the school name. You go to bigfuture.org and then you would put in the University of Texas. Let's just say that's the one we're using here. And then, of course, you'd have to pick. Is it the University of Texas, Arlington, or Austin? You have to be careful with these schools because these schools that have different locations have separate admission processes. So, which location are we talking about? El Paso? There's all kinds of them. So you pick the right location, make sure you get that right. And then you click the application requirements tab, and there's all kinds of information there. Then you want to click the academics and GPA tab, lots of information there. And then finally the SAT and ACT scores tab. So that's another really good way if you have a school in mind. And I can assure you there are all kinds of schools out there for the average student. So please don't be discouraged if that's your child.
There it is. Thanks so much. Oh, Mark, before we go, just really quick. So I know we kept saying that we had to enter schools into the search engines. What if we don't have schools in mind? Like, what do we do? So for example, I know, and maybe this is relevant. So Janaea just took the PSAT and she's gotten like loads of mail. Oh my God. We're getting like all these schools in the mail, that I wouldn't have known to put in that search engine. How did we, and I know we're going to touch on this in future episodes, but how do we get that kind of bird's eye view of all the colleges that are out there that we can start potentially even start considering? Yeah. Because there are so many.
Yeah. So the mail, and you'll get email too, right? And the schools buy lists of names. And so they'll start blitzing your email and your mail. And so here's the thing to keep in mind. You don't completely dismiss that because these decisions of who gets mail are not arbitrary. It's not willy-nilly. Like they have targeted your child.
Right.
Okay. So it's something to be aware of. However, you do want to also realize that there are schools that target as many as 250,000 students, and they may be taking 10 or 20,000 or less. And so one of the things I encounter a lot with students and parents is they're getting all this mail, and the mail is recruitment mail. Sometimes it's extremely misleading. So it gives the impression that you're a slam dunk to get in. That's not true, but it usually means that you have a shot. So if you take that mail and you use it in conjunction with scattergrams, use it in conjunction with the information, the sources we gave earlier, the college data, the big future.
Yes.
Naviance is a fantastic tool, but only 40% of high schools subscribe to Naviance. It's another place to have great scattergram information and other information. If you use it in conjunction with that can be another good way to find schools that are not on your list. That, in addition to, like the CapEx and the college green lights.
All right. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe, rate us, and write reviews of your college-bound kid on iTunes or your favorite podcast listening app. And most importantly, we want you to spread the word. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Elaine Aguilar. Marketing designs by Kimberly Blass. And Your College Bound Kid is produced by Esteban Sartho.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer, please email us at collegeboundquestion@gmail.com. That's collegeboundquestion@gmail.com. Every week, we'll select one question and answer it in each episode. To get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, please visit 171answers.com. That's the number 171answers.com. We look forward to you tuning in again next week.